Let's unbox the Black Series 6-inch scale figure of Teeka the Jawa from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. It's a lucky dip day where I reach into my box of stored away Black Series figures and pull out one at random to open. And today I pulled out Teeka, the adorable Jawa from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. A lot of the Black Series figures that I've opened up recently are humans or humanoid, but of course the adorable Jawas have quite a unique shape here in terms of action figures. So I'm really keen to open this one up and see how different it is. Of course, we've got a lot of plastic ropes here and some fun accessories. She's going to look really cute for my Obi-Wan Kenobi series display. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get Teeka out of the packaging and we'll go over all of the details and articulation. But first, let's take a quick look at the packaging. For the Obi-Wan Kenobi live-action series, the tie-in line of Black Series 6-inch figures was released in the side-angle packaging style, though as you can see, the Obi-Wan Kenobi line was interrupted by the short-lived plastic-free packaging era with the windowless boxes, though thankfully Teeka was released just prior to this experiment, so her packaging has a window where we can see the figure inside. Although Hasbro has since moved to a newer style of packaging for the Black Series line of figures, this side angle style is so nostalgic for me because it's during this era that I fully dove into collecting Black Series figures. So this is the packaging style that I own the most of. At the top we have the Star Wars logo with a glossy finish and the Black Series written underneath. We have a large front window here where we can see we have one Jawa figure and 3 accessories. That window wraps around to the left there. Underneath the window we have an accent color for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It is a lovely blue reminiscent of Obi-Wan's lightsaber. The text here in black reads Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi. That accent color is also used for the character name, which reads Teeka in brackets Jawa, just for clarification. Moving on to the side, we have of course the iconic side angle art. Teeka is a little bit shorter here in the frame. Of course, she is a shorter character where we have some sand dunes of Tatooine here with a couple of moisture evaporators off in the distance. We have that accent color coming in strong at the bottom there with the character name Teeka in brackets Jawa in black. Moving on to the back, that same accent color used for the stripe here. Teeka is number 05 from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series of Black Series figures. We have that same side art here, a little bit larger, a little bit more cropped in, where we can see her holding a bit of scrap technology there. We do have a blurb on the back, but because these figures were kept a little bit under wraps for secrecy reasons for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, this is not a blurb about Teeka herself, rather than the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It reads, Obi-Wan Kenobi is set years after the dramatic events of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, where Kenobi faced the corruption of his friend and Jedi apprentice, Anakin Skywalker turned Sith Lord Darth Vader. In fact, that's pretty much a bio for just episode 3 rather than the Kenobi series. The rest of the packaging here on the back is copyright, barcode, all of that kind of stuff. Lastly, we do have a little bit of a window at the top to let in a little bit of light, though I do find this particular area gets a lot of dust, so I was never particularly fond of this particular window here at the top. We also have a plastic hanger attached, but I did find these can snap off or get lost, so again, not my favorite style for that, but I love these packaging styles. I love the way that they lined up to make that incredible montage there of character art. I do have a little bit of damage to the corner. I did always intend to open this one up. She's been stored in her packaging for far too long, so let's go ahead and open her up. So now I have Teeka out of the packaging as well as all of her accessories, so let's jump in and take a closer look. So one of the things that I'm always really curious about, especially about figures with these long plastic robes, is how well they're going to stand out when I get them out of the packaging. I'm always a little bit worried about figures tipping over, so making them stand up straight out of the box is always a good testament to see how well they're going to really stand up on their own, especially if you don't have stands. So of course, This one is quite steady on her feet. She's got kind of wrapped boots. Of course, she's got slightly smaller feet than a sort of a standard male character that's going to be a full 6 inches tall. She is shorter. But of course, we've got a plastic robe going all the way down. So I was really curious to see if it's actually sitting on the feet or on the robe. And for the most part, when I'm looking really flat, she is standing on her feet. But here in the back, the section here is just a little bit lower than the boot here, unfortunately. So when she is standing, her foot here is not really doing much standing. It's mostly resting on this back edge. Thankfully, this is not toppling her over. Sometimes if it's really fighting with the feet for stability, it can really throw it off. Sometimes if one foot has contact and the other doesn't, it can really set them off on an angle. So I don't mind this too much because I don't think I would want to be seeing too much of the feet or ankles of a Jawa. I always think of them as sort of shuffling with the robes kind of going all the way down, kind of like Grogu, you know, where the illusion is there all the way to the ground. So of course we can see the boots from a few different angles, but yeah, I'm at least happy that she does stand up. Not too much worry there. The other thing was you can't see the back of figures while they're in their packaging. So you could see that we have sort of a sculpted V insert here in the front where we can see a little bit through, kind of see around the wrappings for the ankles, but we've got these short sort of splits here up the side. Now generally this is to allow sort of articulation, flexibility in the legs, but generally speaking, if we have a split to move the legs, it's up around the hips so we can fully move the legs at the hip joints. This is really short. If you're going to do a split, I think it would sort of be more helpful to go up at least to knee height so we can at least sort of kick the legs around at the knee point, if not all the way to the hips. I'm not sure that this split is really going to do much of anything in terms of articulation because at this point the robes are actually quite stiff. Now I know generally speaking the lower half of figures, if there is anything kind of be over the legs, it's going to be made out of a flexible plastic. So the vest here that Teeka is wearing is of that sort of flexible, not quite rubber, but it definitely has a lot more freedom of movement there. You can see I can sort of move it around, different to the hard plastic used for the solid components like on the sleeve here. When it comes to the bottom, this is flexible plastic, but it feels a lot more rigid in my hands here. We've got all of these deep folds and sculpted sort of creases here with the fabric. There is quite a surface texture that feels quite fun to run my hands over. It's got that fabric grain that's actually quite a deep sculpting surface texture to it. Of course, we've got all these wrinkles. We've got sort of this sort of tattered edge sculpting around the edges, which gives it an extra thickness again, so we don't have that really thin edge. So that is making it thick. We've got these sort of raised sections here, allowing us to see the boots. And you can see in the back, we've just got these really deep sections, the way that the fabric is sculpted to be folding here, again that tattered edge. So the whole thing sort of feels reinforced by just the sheer layers and textures here, so it feels quite rigid. So I don't know really why they decided to cut in such a short section here to flare out, because it's actually quite hard to pull this plastic back. That doesn't actually feel that flexible, and even if I pull it back, there's absolutely nothing I can really do with the feet to kind of utilize that split up the side. And there's one on the other side. To be honest, it just kind of grabs my attention and it's just kind of feels useless. I'm not really sure why it is there. I think I would prefer it just to be fully, just no seam there. Just give us the full sculpting, because to be honest, feeling the rigidity of this, I don't think we're really going to be doing much with the legs on the inside. So you can see she does have sort of a light gray coloring the plastic there for her legs, where we can see they're kind of almost like a Tuscan style wrapping for her legs there, going all the way down to her boots. I can kind of lift them in there. You can kind of see that it's kind of at the knee point, it shifts to brown plastic, but because of this huge big plastic section here for the robe, sort of the skirt section, we're not really going to be doing much at all. We might be able to get a little bit of swivel side to side, but I'm not swinging the legs around. I'm not sort of really getting the legs out to the sides much. So I probably would have preferred not to have these. I often say that I err more on the side of accuracy rather than articulation, but that's because I tend to be a little bit boring when it comes to posing my Black Series figures. They're mostly standing upright with a weapon or two in their hands. I'm not adventurous with my toy photography, taking them outside, doing really, really cool poses. I'm quite envious of fans who manage to get some really cool artistic photos and poses with their figures. So I tend to utilize those lower articulation points a little less than other fans. So I don't see the point of them. I don't think even adventurous fans are really going to get much flexibility. And to be honest, I don't think Jawas necessarily need a lot. They're not terribly acrobatic. Certainly Teeka is not in how we see her in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. She's a classic Jawa, a scavenger selling junk that they kind of steal from places. So I don't need her to be doing a lot with those legs. I just want her to be standing up and looking cute like a Jawa. So let's move on and check out the articulation that we can see and move. But I'm really liking the sculpting around the head. So looking in, I can fully appreciate the detail on the head here. So looking in under the hood, this is actually two pieces, which is really quite fun. The hood is made from slightly flexible plastic. You can see I can kind of push it in around the head, and the head is sculpted out of a solid plastic that looks like all of these little bandages wrapped around the head. Now, of course, over the years, we've got varying different styles of trying to do the glowing eyes for Jawas. As I love those older sort of 90s era ones where we had the sort of the little light channel. So if you had a light source behind them, the light could go through and make their eyes glow. But here we have gold, which is kind of a fun effect. It kind of is striking. I know it's not glowing, but it kind of has a little bit more of a, just a little bit, I don't know, it just kind of stands out a little bit more than just a standard yellow. I think that that's really quite fun. So when it's kind of back and you're just looking at the black, it kind of almost has a glowing effect. I really do like that. And it still stands up even when you're looking up really close, which is fun. I like the fact that they did the hood as a separate piece. If you look through on the side, you can just make out a little bit of light through the back because it's not fixed down here in the back. And if I tip the head all the way sort of down, I'm hoping I can show that you can see the black sort of head tucked in underneath the hood there, right in the back. So this is a separate piece, though of course if you're going to be doing a lot of turning around, it's going to be very hard to turn the head without the hood and vice versa. So pretty much functionally in terms of articulation, they are going to move like one piece. Though of course you do get a little bit of gapping around the edges if you're going to be doing some extreme movements, but I'm surprised at quite how to the side. I wasn't actually expecting, often hoods and things like this, they really start to catch in the back, but I can actually turn the head quite a fair way around all the way over to the shoulder, which is really quite fun. And it has the same sort of gathered fabric, that same surface texture that the rest of the robes do, which is really nice. I know some Jawa figures over the years have soft goods. It's always a trick to try and sort of find the right technique for different characters. Sometimes when it comes to things like robes and cloaks and hoods and things like that, sometimes soft goods really work, and other times the plastic sort of set sculpted version is the one that I like best. And there are some soft goods Jawas that I like, but I do like the approach for this Black Series 6-inch version. I love the little sculpted lines here, the little peak at the back, the way it's kind of all crinkled here in the back. We've got a seam line down the back. Of course, it's not actually attached to the robes, but I think it does a pretty good job of kind of looking like it's all kind of connected there. That's really fun. I don't see any additional paint or weathering on the hood. It looks like it is a flat plastic color, but I think for this particular section, that's fine. I'm not expecting the hood of Jawas to get dirty. We do have additional paint details on the lower half, which we'll get to soon. So of course, carrying on from the hood, we've got that same fantastic kind of fabric texture over the rest of the robes. We can see it coming down here with the hands, towards the hands. at the wrists, and it flares out, which I love. And we've got a really sort of tattered, worn, a raw edge hem to this sleeve, which is accented with a really nice subtle shading. There isn't a hard line. I love how soft and subtle this is, because of course if they're digging around in edges and stealing stuff, they're going to get a little bit dirty and grubby around their sleeves there as they're fossicking around, which I think is fun. If you look on the underside, sort of looking up the robe, you can see that there isn't like an interior sleeve. This is just a solid piece that's kind of sculpted with a little bit of a recess there with a darker color, the same color as this sort of exterior weathering here. So it does kind of look like it's going away to shadow, and we have sort of like a brown glove here for the hands rather than the black that we see on some other Jawa figures. It looks like Teeka is wearing gloves this time, because they do look like gloves, I think, rather than hands. There's just something about the color that's just reading like it's supposed to match this rather than black. We don't really have any of the sort of the black exposed other than the face. So again, the same thing on the other side. Fantastic fabric sculpting pattern there, that texture. It's such a deep texture too. You can really feel it with your hands holding the figure. Another feathered edge there. I love the sort of the sculpting of all the little sort of frayed strands there of the fabric. That's really nice. Looking at the underside, that same dark brown color with a recess there, so it's tucked in, so you really got to look straight up on the underside to really see that. And again, the hand articulated in there, which is really fun. If I lift the head to the side, we can kind of see that there is a little bit of a collar edge to this main brown robe, and it looks like there's kind of like a crisscross brown undershirt of sorts just right up against the neckline. It's a little hard to show because it's really tightened under the neck, and then we kind of get the edge there of the robe, and then it comes down. And of course we've got it in two parts for this particular figure. We've got the chest section. You can kind of see we've got a little bit of a section here where the robe would seam together, and we've also got a torso midline here just under there. It's pretty well hidden, cutting in just underneath this sort of a bandolier section here. Really clever. I like that. So it doesn't interrupt the flow of the robe. Though of course, if you really want to line up that edge there of the robe, we're going to sort of sit here torso about there. And then we've got this main section of the robe here, which I talked about earlier, but it is really nice. I love this texture. It just shows up really well. It feels really nice. We've got this big edge coming down here with sort of that tattered edge. I like the way that there is actually a lip, so it doesn't just look like a line sort of down the front. It does actually look like thick fabric overlapping itself. We've got all of these deep folds because it looks like heavy fabric, which is really fun. We've got those edges in the back looking like it's sort of weathered, not quite as worn as the sleeves, which I kind of like. I don't want it to look too messy. And it was kind of a little bit hard to tell in the box. Sometimes the plastic kind of plays tricks on your eyes, but there is a really light, sort of like a dark brown airbrushing, just to accent the creases and folds here on the front. When I turn it around to the back, it doesn't appear that we have that same paint effect. This looks a little bit more clean here in the back, but down the front, kind of around this point, coming down, it looks like there is a brown. You can kind of see here where it is and then over here where it isn't. But I do like how subtle it is. It doesn't look like it just sort of cuts off at an awkward spot. And again, if she's crouching down, grabbing things out of engines and stealing SWTOR parts and things like that, she's going to get a little bit grubby down the front because she's not got an apron or anything down the front. So that kind of works. They're not going to get quite as grubby down the back. If they were, I think it would possibly be like sand kicking up in the back, and then that's just adding extra complexity to the back of the figure, just, you know, for no reason really. So I love the robe on this one. Again, kind of a tricky decision. You know, sometimes the vintage figure, I kind of feel like, you know, inspires a lot of people to want soft goods robes for Jawas and things like that. I remember the Power of the Force 2, the plastic ones with the light through the eyes. So I kind of grew up with plastic Jawas. So this is is a lot of fun. And of course, Teeka has a little bit of a unique costume element. She's got this light brown vest, which is kind of fun. So it comes quite down here in the back. It has a little bit of a sculpted texture. If I move her arm out of the way, we've got a few sort of crisscross stitches. Kind of reminds me of the hoods that the Ewoks wear in Return of the Jedi, where they've sort of done a few hand stitching there, just kind of weave sections of leather together to make this vest. It comes up over the shoulders, and interestingly, we've got this large bandolier that is actually part of it. It's not a separate piece over the vest, it's actually sculpted, so it sits really nice and tight over the shoulder. It's not floating, it's not going to come down on her arm there. It's kept in place, and that does such a fantastic job of completely sitting over that articulating line there in the middle. It just completely hides it, and I think that's fantastic. So of course the whole thing is made out of this color plastic. I kind of like the soft, slightly raw edge, like a leather hide. We've got a little bit of creasing in here. If we look at the other side, we've got more of those little crisscross hand stitches there along the seams. I love that. Doesn't look like we have any kind of stitching or sort of plastic stitching at the shoulders. We do just have a small little sort of plastic seam line there, but we've got this sculpted bandolier over the top, which is painted. Looking at it, it looks pretty well painted. There is a little section here where the brown paint has gone just a little bit further than the pouch itself, but it's kind of on the underside, so it's giving a little bit more of like a shadow effect. So it doesn't immediately grab my eyes, but when I'm looking up really close, I can see that. We've got the dark brown following over here. We've got a sort of a silver technology piece here, a bit of greebly, and a little silver, kind of like a little badge or a little stud here, which is really nice. It is raised, it is painted very tidily in a brilliant gold. It looks a little bit different to the gold used for the eyes. I'm kind of glad. I was hoping it would just look like they had some other Jawa's eyes sitting on her vest there. So it does look a little bit different. And you can see that we come around to the back and we've got sort of buckles and straps. The buckles itself, I don't see sort of any additional paint. The buckle would be there. It's just in the same color, though we do have a nice kind of worn, pebbled texture here to that leather strap over the shoulder, which is nice. We've even got some little leather keepers, little sort of notches there for the buckle straps, which is really nice. But again, I often find that Hasbro tends to skip over the tiny little silver metallic touches to buckles for leather straps. And considering this one's on the back, I was not really fully expecting them to paint that either. Perhaps one detail that I think my eyes are trying to read, because sometimes when you're looking at trying to make out if metallic things are painted or if it's just the light catching your eye, I can see that there is a tiny little sort of dome stud for the closures of each of the pouches. But I'm gonna have to take, I think the domes actually do have a tiny silver dot. I don't think that is just the light catching on it. I think that's actually a tiny silver dot. I'm looking at this one here in particular, and it's just reading like a different color to me. It could be my eyes, maybe I'm getting a little bit older. I don't think that is the light catching it. I think that is a tiny silver dot. To be honest, I'm quite impressed if that is actually silver. I will put in some, hopefully a few closer up photos will hopefully be able to focus in on that detail, because oftentimes, unfortunately, Hasbro does tend to skip tiny little metallic little studs and domes on leather straps and things like that. And it's always one of those things where it's just like, I know it's really tiny. I'm only going to see it when I'm really looking up close like this. Once I put it on display, my eyes simply can't see that. But it's just those little things that you just really appreciate Hasbro taking the time to put there. So in terms of the other parts that we have onto this figure, they are all hidden underneath, and I can lift this front section here to hopefully show the interesting sort of wrappings here on the lower legs, and it's really hard to see if there's much detail at all on those upper legs. And to be honest, I'm not really gonna try and wrestle with this figure to sort of investigate that further, because I don't want to stress these splits or deform the plastic. You know, sometimes when you play with it backwards and forwards, you can kind of loosen it or create a few creases. But yeah, interesting to show that those wrapped sections go all the way up to the knees. So I just don't know that we're really going to be able to test out articulation. So while we're here, I'm just going to see if I can show. I can swivel the lower legs. I can see in there. It's going to be really hard to show. It is swiveling side to side at the knee point, and I can articulate at the ankles, which is about what I think I would want and need. To be honest, I wouldn't be mad if the Black Series figures were a little bit more like some of the older ones, where they're simply solid plastic from the waist down and they just kind of sit on a flat surface. But I know for the Black Series, we're talking about an articulated line of figures. We do want them, even if we're not necessarily going to use that. So, you know, I think it's easier for them to just use parts that they already have. We've got the lower legs being unique, and I can move them around a little bit, though to be honest, those splits in the side are not really going to be doing anything for me. Perhaps if you really want to, you could take a craft knife or perhaps even scissors and cut this split up further if you really want to customize this Jawa into, say, a Jedi Jawa or something else. Maybe they've got packing with weapons or something like that, and you want to create some really interesting poses. There is sculpting underneath, so that if you cut up that split to sort of show it off and utilize the articulation underneath, it is there. But I will be keeping mine as Teeka from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, so she won't be jumping around with lightsabers anytime soon. But it's just that one little wiggle there with the paint on my particular one, so I'm really happy. I really like the soft effects. Sometimes when they do weathering and things like that, it's really harsh. You can kind of see where it cuts off. That sort of ombre fading effect for the weathering around the sleeves is really nice, and that subtle airbrushing on the front's really nice. And I love the gold eyes. I think that's a fantastic touch. So quickly, I jumped around a little bit for the articulation. I showed the head. I was really impressed with actually quite how far to the side, a little bit more to this side than that side. I think perhaps the vest is a little bit higher on this side. I feel like there's a little bit more of resistance at this section, a little bit of up and down as well, which is quite nice. Okay, so I like the fact that the shoulders here are a little bit exposed because she's got accessories to hold. I do want to be able to move her arms around. The bandolier strap on this side comes down further than the vest on this side, so this arm is just a little bit more restricted in terms of the range of movement. But to be honest, when I'm pulling both of them up, it's not actually affecting that angle quite as much. They're not quite straight across, a little bit angled down. But that's actually quite good. I thought that one really might limit there. So swiveling up, this is going to be a little bit more restricted. Let's have a look. I think this one's going to go, oh, that's kind of stiff to swivel up. Okay, so yeah, this one is not going to go up, but this one I can. So that is where that is really playing into that. It's just going to restrict that a little bit more. Not that I often need my Jawas to raise their arms right in the air. I really do like the way that on a lot of Black Series figures, we get this really nice sculpting line that kind of makes the robes look like they're flowing down the arms. So we've got this nice, especially in the back, it looks really nice. But of course, if she's going to be holding something, we've got to move a little bit stiff. This one's been in her packaging for a little bit while. So, of course, these are flared sleeves, so they're a little bit bulkier than, say, sort of a standard sleeve. So that's not too bad. That one is pretty, it's sitting out just a little bit from the body because we've got the bandolier sitting here against the side, so that's about as close as her arm can come down on that side. This side, we don't have that bandolier, so she can tuck her elbow all the way in, which is quite nice, and of course they can swivel at that point as well. The hands, we do have rockers. We've got up and down on this hand, and of course we can swivel. The hands, that's a very small little attachment point. I'm often very wary of potentially breaking those points off. This one is very tight. Sometimes when they are painted, it just kind of gets in those articulation joints and makes it very stiff. That's very stiff. I've very carefully put pressure on that to kind of press it forward. That was a little bit nerve-wracking. I'm probably going to keep that one as just a swivel. The other hand is also an up and down. That one was a little bit easier, but it is very small movements. It's not a lot. So mostly just those swiveling parts. So one of the major articulating points that I really want to check out is how well she can turn to the side. And she can spin all the way around. Okay, that's cool. And because the line is hidden, it almost doesn't actually change the look. You can almost, I mean, the feet are, you got to swivel those legs around. But that would be kind of fun to give like a slightly different look to another Jawa. If you were army building this particular one, you could swivel it all the way around, and the robe doesn't have that seam down the front. Kind of gives it a little bit of a different look, but that's really easy. She swivels all the way around. Not as much of a front and back because the vest is just in the way. She's not really going to be doing a lot of leaning back. We don't have a split or anything up there in the back to really utilize that one. And again, she's kind of got this hitting. It does really well for hiding that, but it stops us leaning forward too much because we've got this in the way. I note that you could possibly cut this vest off because it's not anchored down anywhere that I can see. If I'm peeking up across the back, it doesn't look like there are sort of pegs attaching it in the back there. So if you wanted to make this one look like a little bit more of a generic Jawa, you could probably take this off because it looks like it was probably a part of the assembly process. It was put on and then the arms are connected into place because of the way that this bandolier kind of restricts us from just pulling the vest off over the shoulders as we would on a normal accessory figure there. So that waist is great. I showed the legs earlier. Pretty much all I'm going to be able to do is swivel those legs around at the knee and the ankle articulation if I really need to, but to be honest, I don't know how easily that is actually going to be utilized. I can swivel them side to side, that might be useful, but pointing the toes is going to make it impossible to make this figure stand up because, yeah, it's resting on this section here, which is just completely stopping me from doing that much with the feet. But even though I swiveled her legs around, she stands up pretty well. It kind of gives me you can hear sort of the Jawa speak in your head when you sort of have them all posed. It kind of looks like she's ready to go steal some stuff. So of course we've got 3 accessories with Teeka. So she's going to stand there in the back. It's fantastic opening a figure that you don't have to worry about falling over. She's got such a lower center of gravity and really stable there across the bottom. So first off, we have the classic Jawa Ion Blaster here. I'm not sure how well she is going to hold this though, and to be honest, I don't really think of her using this. I think of her with her sort of her tech wares and things like that. One of the accessories that I do wish Teeka came with was the little model T16 Skyhopper toy that Obi-Wan wants Teeka to find for young Luke Skywalker, but I know Teeka, being number 5 in the Black Series line, was released quite early on in the sort of the merchandising campaign for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, where I know they were probably still trying to keep Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa's appearance in the series a secret. So putting a T16 little toy in there would probably give that away. So I understand that when they were making this figure, they probably were not able to include that as an accessory. But considering that Teeka is a little bit of a minor character in the show, I'm not sure that we're ever really going to see this one reissued, to be honest. So perhaps, fingers crossed, down the line, maybe we'll get a Black Series young Luke Skywalker with T16 accessories to kind of fill out the complete storyline here, because I think that that would have been a fun little accessory for her to hold a really sort of important section of the storyline there. But that's just a little bit of just an aside there. So this is a really nice blaster, though I have to point out when I'm holding it up to the light, I don't know if that's like, I can't tell if that is actually like see-through or if that's just a metallic catching the light. My eyes are struggling to tell. It's looking like a see-through section, which is kind of odd. I was expecting it to just be solid grey plastic. There are some really nice like silver metallic sort of brush effects over it, kind of given it a little bit of a sort of a battle beaten up effect to it. There are some really nice fine details. The trigger here is really fine, which is nice, and even sort of the emitter section is recessed, which I like. It never looks particularly realistic when these things are just flat across the front there. I like that it's recessed. I think that that looks nice, though of course I'm not sure how well she's going to hold it. Sometimes when it comes to rifles and these smaller characters, it can be really hard to kind of get them to do it in a specific pose. So I just took a moment to get the blaster accessory into Teeka's hands, because she's got small, tight hands and her trigger finger is not separate. But of course we don't have an enclosed trigger guard, so it doesn't really need to be separate. But this is about as good as I can get her to hold it. She's holding it, but she's not really kind of looking like she's using it to aim, so that might be an issue for some collectors. She can sort of hold it there. I do of course like it when Black Series figures can hold their accessories, particularly weapons, but she doesn't really look like she's gonna be aiming it at any unsuspecting astromechs here, but it doesn't look too awkward, at least. So she does hold it. Perhaps not the most ideally there, but it is a really nice accessory there. And that tiny trigger guard sits just by her finger, so it does actually look pretty good in the way that she's holding it. I do like that. So the other hand, again, no extended trigger finger on this one, but I do want to see if she can actually hold this little piece of a random tech that we have here. So it kind of looks a little bit like an inverted soup bowl of sorts, but we've got a flat surface here. The surface is a little bit plain. It's got a little bit of weathering, though to be honest I'm not sure if that is just artifacts from the manufacturing process. It looks like this kind of looks a little bit more like a proper right way up. We've kind of got like a bit of a sort of an old sort of cast iron sort of hammered metal bottom here, and then we've got sort of a brown sort of bit of a greebly section here at the top. I'm hoping that she might be able to grip around this and look like she's holding it. That looks like the surface to hold it from. So let's see if she can carry it. Again, I'm going to be just a little bit careful with this because she's got kind of small fingers and I don't want to bend particularly her thumb out of place. So I'm going to sort of pull this up. This is tricky. Going to wiggle it in. See if I can get that thumb out of the way. Her fingers are very tight. I'm just going to have to pull. Sometimes you got to pull their thumbs out and then quickly get things into place before they kind of get back in to position. She's going to fight with me on this one. I think she can hold it. There we go. Okay. So if I pull her arms back into position, see if I can get her to sort of hold it. Like she's running away with some stolen tech there. That's actually not bad. There's like a little recessed section here that her hands are fitting quite nicely into. Did take a little bit of a wiggle to get her thumb to sort of open up a little bit so that it fitted around that top section there, but kind of looks like she's just committed a heist and is running off with a piece of stolen technology to sell to some unsuspecting moisture farmer. That looks really fun. So we've now got another piece. But to be honest, I don't think this is really designed to be held. It's a pretty square, rectangular, just a big block here. So I think this looks more fun. It's just kind of like a little bit of set decoration, just something to sort of sit next to her. So it's pretty much all grey. It has just a little bit of sort of that subtle metallic flicking that I see in some of the nice grey sort of gunmetal pieces here. There is a lot of coils, kind of looks like heating elements on a few sections, and then it looks like a lot of sort of cable, coil, pipe, sort of rolled up in a frame here with sort of a little bit of painted detail here. We've sort of got a bit of a mustard color and some more sort of extra little it almost feels like wire, but it is sculpted on there. It's kind of fun. It feels like almost like a sort of a paperclip detail there on the underside. But yeah, it is just kind of like a little extra piece. And I kind of wish Hasbro did this more often. Just gave us like little extra accessories that don't necessarily always have to be held, but something just to kind of flesh out a display scene a little bit. Because of course, Jawas are always going to have little bits of a stolen tech to scurry around with. So I think that that's kind of fun, especially since this is a smaller figure in the standard single figure packaging line, the same price point. For us here in New Zealand, she was the same as the much taller figures. I like having at least a few other sort of random accessories to kind of help justify the price point, though I do have to say I did wait until she was on a sale. I didn't want to pay the full price for her because she is smaller and she's not quite as a major character as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I did really enjoy her scenes in this series. And speaking of Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'll just quickly grab a Black Series figure of Obi-Wan from the series because I really want to see the scale of Teeka next to a standard human character from the series. For a size comparison, I grabbed one of my other Obi-Wan Kenobi series figures. This one is Obi-Wan from Jabeam number 11 from the Black Series line. So taking a ruler, we can see that Teeka is just under 11 centimeters on the ruler here. And that is a little under 4.5 inches. So of course, much shorter than the 6 inches of the Black Series scale. So I think she looks really cute. Of course, Jawas are not going to be the same height. I think this is really appropriate. She looks really cute. I like the accessories that she comes with. Of course, this isn't the right Obi-Wan to go with this figure. I've still got a few Obi-Wan figures to open. So hopefully I'll get round to opening that one up so I can make this scene look a little bit better. But it's really fun to see these two characters together. I thought those scenes were really quite fun. And I gotta say, I kind of wish that I had a few more of her just because she's just so well done. I like the accessories. You know, you can sort of build out a few different Jawas in the background of scenes. Not necessarily this scene, but you know, other Tatooine scenes. I think this one was really fun. And I like the fact that she came with a few little accessories as well. So I had a lot of fun. This was such a unique and different figure for me. And of course, a lot of the articulation is completely hidden. And to be honest, I'm not really going to utilize it. I like that it's there. And I think the details that we do need, like the textures, the weathering, and those really cute eyes are done really well. She can still move her arms. She can hold her accessories. I think this one is a really cool figure. And I had a lot of fun opening her up. She's been tucked away for far too long. I'm having so much fun really deep diving into my Black Series storage and finding some really cool figures to open and add to my display. So fingers crossed, maybe by the end of the year, I'll have them all open. That's certainly the goal. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure and had a lot of fun checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently unboxed the Tala Durith Imperial Officer figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.